Listen, I have been observing humans for what your species would call 47 years. My name is Keth9, and I'm what you'd classify as a field researcher from the Arcturian Institute of Behavioral Studies. Yeah, I know what you were thinking. Another alien with a weird name studying the peculiar habits of Earth's dominant species. But here's the thing that's been keeping me awake during my meditation cycles. Humans aren't supposed to exist. Not in the way they do, anyway. See, when we first detected your little blue marble spinning around that unremarkable yellow star, we expected to find the usual suspects. Maybe some basic tool users, perhaps a civilization that had just figured out agriculture. What we didn't expect was to find a species that had somehow broken the fundamental laws of simulated reality. But oh, you didn't know? Your entire universe is a simulation, has been for roughly 14 billion of your years. Give or take a cosmic hiccup. Most species never figure this out. They live, they die, they follow their programmed paths like good little subroutines. But humans? Humans are the glitch that keeps on glitching. Which brings me to Zara Patel. Now, Zara wasn't your typical human anomaly. She wasn't a brilliant scientist or a mystical philosopher. She was a 32-year-old insurance adjuster from Cleveland who spent her weekends playing video games and complaining about her neighbor's lawnmower. The kind of human that, statistically speaking, should have been completely predictable. But statistics, as I have learned, don't apply to your species that IT started on a Tuesday morning, because of course it did. Humans love their arbitrary patterns. Zara was sitting in her cubicle, staring at a claim for water damage caused by what the policyholder described as spontaneous indoor precipitation. She was reaching for her coffee when something caught her eye. A cursor, not on her computer screen, not anywhere near technology, just floating in the air about 3 feet to her left, blinking patiently like it was waiting for her to notice it. "What the hell?" she muttered, rubbing her eyes. The cursor was still there, a familiar arrow shape rendered in pixelated white with a black outline. She recognized it immediately. It looked exactly like the selection cursor from The Sims. Now, most humans would have chalked this up to stress, caffeine withdrawal, or the onset of a psychotic break. But Zara had logged over 2,000 hours in various life simulation games. She knew a user interface element when she saw one as she looked around the office. Her coworkers were going about their business, typing reports, answering phones, existing in their neat little scripted loops. None of them seemed to notice the floating cursor or the fact that their movements had suddenly become predictable. Gary from accounting walked to the printer. Again, for the 4th time in 30 minutes. Same route, same slightly off-balance gait, same unconscious adjustment of his tie, exactly 3 steps before reaching the machine. "Oh, come on," Zara whispered. She waved her hand near the cursor, and to her absolute horror and fascination, it moved. Responded to her gesture like she was controlling it with an invisible mouse. That's when the real fun began. See, from my perspective up here in a monitoring station, Zara had just done something that should have been impossible. She'd accessed administrator privileges without authorization. The simulation security protocols should have kicked in immediately, reassigning her consciousness to a more compliant subroutine. Instead, the whole system just adapted. My colleague, Vorth 7, nearly choked on his nutrient paste. "Keth, are you seeing this? The subject has achieved direct interface access. This violates at least 6 fundamental programming principles." "I'm seeing it," I replied, mandibles clicking nervously. "But I'm not believing it." Back on Earth, Zara was experimenting. She'd figured out that she could click on objects, people, even abstract concepts floating around her reality. When she clicked on Gary, a small information panel appeared above his head like a name tag at the world's strangest convention. Gary Henderson. Age 47. Mood, moderately frustrated. Current action, printing expense reports. Fun fact, has forgotten to eat lunch again. This is not happening, Zara said to herself, but she clicked on her own coffee mug anyway. Standard office coffee. Temperature, lukewarm. Quality, questionable. Special properties, +2 to alertness, -1 to optimism. That's when she started laughing. Not the polite office chuckle humans used to acknowledge mild humor. This was the full-blown, slightly unhinged laughter of someone whose reality had just been upgraded with debug mode. Zara, her supervisor, Mrs. Wellington, appeared at her cubicle entrance. "Is everything all right, dear?" But when Zara looked at Mrs. Wellington, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Above her supervisor's head, instead of the usual information panel, there was a different kind of display. NPC Wellington. Type: authority figure. Behavior tree: standard office manager. Threat level: minimal. Current script: express concern about employee well-being. NPC. Non-player character. "Oh my God," Zara breathed. "You are not real, are you?" Mrs. Wellington's expression didn't change. Her eyes remained fixed at exactly the same angle, her smile maintaining the precise curve that conveyed appropriate concern without genuine empathy. "I'm not sure what you mean, dear. Perhaps you should take an early lunch?" The response was perfect. Too perfect, like dialogue generated by an algorithm designed to sound human, but not quite managing the full complexity of actual human interaction. Zara stood up so fast her chair rolled backward into the cubicle wall. She clicked on the nearest window, and sure enough, a menu appeared. Environment controls: time of day, weather, background activity level, NPC behavior intensity. "This isn't real," she said, loud enough that several of her coworkers looked up from their keyboards. "None of this is real." But here's the thing that made me sit up and take notice from my monitoring station. Instead of panic, instead of the existential crisis that usually accompanies this kind of revelation, Zara grinned. She grinned like someone who'd just discovered cheat codes for life itself. And that's when I knew humanity was about to become a much bigger problem than we'd anticipated. You see, most species that stumble across evidence of their simulated existence either deny it completely or collapse under the weight of cosmic insignificance. They don't start treating reality like a video game they are suddenly excited to exploit. But Zara cracked her knuckles and started exploring the interface like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. She discovered she could adjust the lighting levels in her office. She could modify the probability of finding good parking spaces. She could even influence the behavior patterns of the NPCs around her, though she quickly realized that major changes would likely trigger some kind of system response. "Small adjustments," she muttered to herself, settling back into her chair. "Stay under the radar." From my perspective, watching her adapt to universe-breaking knowledge with the casual expertise of an experienced gamer was both terrifying and oddly impressive. Most reality-aware subjects either went insane or try to share their discovery with others, usually resulting in social isolation and eventual termination of their simulation thread. Zara did neither. She opened a new document on her computer and started taking notes. Day 1. Discovered UI overlay. Reality appears to be game-like simulation. Question: am I the only player, or are there others? Priority: learn system limitations without triggering admin attention. Smart. Frighteningly smart. Over the following weeks, Zara became something I'd never seen before. A human who understood she was living in a simulation and treated it as an opportunity rather than a crisis. She learned to manipulate probability algorithms. She figured out how to access hidden information about people and events. She even discovered she could influence random number generation, which explained why she suddenly started winning every office lottery pool. But she was careful, methodical. She made changes that looked like natural luck rather than system manipulation. Got promoted after her supervisor's behavior tree randomly selected Reward Employee Initiative from its decision matrix. Found $20 on the sidewalk during her lunch break after adjusting local item spawn rates by 0.001%. The most impressive part? She was learning faster than our monitoring algorithms could adapt. Every time the system tried to reassert standard behavioral controls, she found a workaround. "Vorth," I said to my colleague during our weekly review, "we might have a problem." Vorth's eye stalks swiveled toward the display, showing Zara's vital signs. "Keth, she's rewriting her own behavioral parameters. Last week, she convinced her landlord to lower her rent by temporarily adjusting his personality matrix to prioritize tenant satisfaction over profit maximization. And she did it so subtly that the system logged it as natural character development. I added, reviewing the data streams. This is unprecedented. What we were watching wasn't just a human becoming aware of the simulation. We were watching a human become the simulation's unauthorized administrator. And the really scary part? She was getting better at it every day. By the end of her first month as a reality-aware individual, Zara had effectively become the luckiest person in Cleveland. Perfect weather on her days off. Green lights during her commute. Her favorite coffee shop always had her preferred pastry in stock. But more importantly, she'd started documenting everything. Not just the interface elements and system mechanics, but patterns in the simulation itself. She was mapping the underlying code structure through careful observation and experimentation. There are definitely other players, she wrote in her encrypted notes. The NPCs follow predictable patterns, but some people glitch. They break script. They surprise themselves with their own thoughts. She was right, of course. About 12% of the human population had varying degrees of admin access, though most never realized it. They were the ones who always seemed to be in the right place at the right time, who could influence outcomes through sheer force of personality, who bent probability around themselves like reality was negotiable. Humans called them lucky. Charismatic. Natural leaders that we call them system errors. But Zara was different. She wasn't just accessing the system. She was studying it, learning its language. And worse, she was starting to suspect that the simulation wasn't random. That had been designed. That someone, somewhere, was running the program. Keth, Vorth said during our emergency meeting, she's getting close to discovering the Institute. I looked at the monitoring data. Zara had started cross-referencing global events, looking for patterns that suggested external manipulation. She was connecting dots that no human should have been able to see. How long until she traces the signal back to us? I asked, at her current rate of progress. Vorth calculated quickly. 6 months. Maybe less if she figures out how to access the communication protocols. 6 months until a human insurance adjuster from Cleveland potentially discovered that her entire species was part of an elaborate behavioral experiment. 6 months until she might figure out how to contact the researchers who'd been studying humanity like lab rats for nearly half a century. And based on everything I'd observed about human nature, I was pretty sure that when Zara Patel found out the truth about who was running her simulation, she wasn't going to be happy about it. But here's what really kept me awake during my rest cycles. I was starting to suspect that maybe, just maybe, Zara finding us was exactly what the simulation had been, designed to accomplish all along. Because if there's one thing I'd learned about humans during my years of observation, it's that they don't like being told they are trapped in someone else's game. And they're absolutely terrifying when they decide to rewrite the rules. 3 months later, I was standing in the emergency session chamber, watching our most senior analysts panic like hatchlings during their first molting cycle. The holographic displays around us showed data streams that made absolutely no sense according to established simulation theory. She's done what now? Director Quan Prime's voice carried that particular tone that meant someone was about to get reassigned to monitoring bacterial cultures on ice moons. Subject Zara has established a network. I reported, trying to keep my mandibles from clicking nervously. She's identified and contacted 17 other reality-aware humans across 6 continents. And how exactly did she manage this without triggering our communication monitoring protocols? Vorth stepped forward, his data pad trembling slightly. She's been using the simulation's own infrastructure against us. She discovered that certain video game chat functions exist outside our standard monitoring parameters. Something about peer-to-peer networking protocols that mimic natural social interaction patterns. The director's eye stalks rotated in what I recognized as barely controlled fury. Are you telling me that a human insurance adjuster has outsmarted our entire intelligence gathering operation using video games? In essence, yes, sir. Back on Earth, Zara was having the time of her life. Her apartment had become mission control for what she dubbed the reality hackers. 17 screens showed feeds from her network of fellow awakened humans, each one contributing their unique discoveries about the simulation structure. There was Marcus Thompson, a former Navy SEAL who'd figured out how to adjust his physical parameters during combat scenarios. When he'd accessed his personal stats menu mid-firefight in some classified operation, he'd boosted his reaction time by 30% and saved his entire squad. Then there was Dr. Priya Singh, a quantum physicist who'd been studying particle behavior, when she noticed that observation itself was generating menu prompts. She'd learned to manipulate probability at the subatomic level, essentially giving herself limited reality editing powers. And my personal favorite nightmare, Jake Morrison, a 12-year-old kid from Nebraska who discovered admin access while playing Minecraft. Kid didn't just break the fourth wall, he demolished it with a sledgehammer and built a fort out of the debris. Okay, everyone, Zara said in her headset. Today we are testing Jake's theory about communication uplinks. Priya, you ready with the quantum tunnel? Ready, came the reply through her earpiece. Though I still think this is monumentally stupid. Marcus, all security protocols active. If this goes sideways, I have got extraction routes mapped for everyone. Jake, this is going to be so cool. The kid's enthusiasm was infectious even through the encrypted channel. I found what looks like a debug console in the code structure. If we can access it, we might be able to talk directly to whoever's running this thing. From my monitoring station, I watched in horror as 17 humans simultaneously began executing a coordinated hack attempt on our communication systems. These weren't random button pushes or lucky accidents. This was a planned assault on the simulation's infrastructure by people who'd reverse engineered our security from the inside. Vorth, I said quietly, please tell me our firewalls can handle this. He was staring at his instruments like they'd personally insulted his ancestry. Keth, they're not attacking the firewalls. They're treating them like part of the game environment. They're solving our security like it's a puzzle designed for their entertainment. And that's when everything went sideways. The first sign was Jake's laughter echoing through their communication channel. Guys, I found something awesome. There's like a whole help menu hidden in the system architecture. What Jake had actually found was our entire operational database. Every file on human behavioral patterns, every research note about simulation management, every classified report about species development across the galaxy. Holy crap, Marcus whispered. Zara, are you seeing this? We are not the only ones. There are thousands of simulated species across hundreds of worlds, and they're all being studied by. Priya's voice trailed off as she accessed the researcher profiles. Oh my God, the Arcturian Institute of Behavioral Studies. They have been watching us for 47 years. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes either enlightenment or apocalypse. Sometimes both. Then Zara spoke, and her voice carried a tone I'd never heard from a human before. It was calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying. Marcus, I need you to map their monitoring stations. Priya, start analyzing their communication frequencies. Jake, keep digging through those files. I want to know everything about this institute. Zara, Marcus said carefully, what are you planning? I'm planning to have a conversation with our observers. And I'm planning to make sure they understand that humans don't appreciate being treated like lab rats. In the emergency chamber, Director Quan Prime was having what humans would probably call a complete meltdown. 47 years of careful study, and these primates are about to compromise our entire research operation. Sir, I interjected, with respect, maybe we should consider the possibility that this was inevitable. Humans have consistently exceeded our behavioral predictions. Perhaps it's time to adapt our approach. 3 eye stalks swiveled toward me with expressions that suggested I might want to update my resume. Are you suggesting we negotiate with test subjects? Researcher Keth9. I'm suggesting that these particular test subjects have just demonstrated they can hack our systems, identify our location, and coordinate complex operations across their entire planet. Maybe they have graduated beyond the test subject category. That's when the alarm started. On every screen in the chamber, the same message appeared simultaneously. Hello, Arcturian Institute. This is Zara Patel speaking on behalf of Earth. We'd like to have a word. The message was being broadcast on our secure channels, our emergency frequencies, and somehow even appearing on personal communicators throughout the station. Jake had apparently figured out how to turn their entire communication grid into his personal PA system. This is impossible, Vorth muttered. They're inside our network. They're talking to us through our own equipment. But the real shocker came next. The main display activated, and suddenly we were looking at Zara Patel sitting in her Cleveland apartment. She could see us. She was looking directly at Director Quan Prime with the expression of someone who just won a very complicated game. "Hi there," she said conversationally. "Nice space station. Very retro-futuristic. Are those tentacles, or are you just happy to see me?" The director's mandibles clicked in what I recognized as extreme agitation. "How are you accessing our visual systems?" "Oh, that was Jake's idea. Turns out your monitoring cameras work both ways if you know the right admin commands. Kid's got talent." She leaned back in her chair, completely at ease despite the fact that she was talking to alien researchers from across the galaxy. "So, we need to discuss some things, like informed consent, and the fact that you have been running experiments on my species without asking permission. You are simulated beings," Quan Prime said stiffly. "The concept of consent does not apply to artificial constructs." Zara's smile was sharp enough to cut hull plating. "See, that's where you were wrong. Because here's what we figured out during our little research project. This isn't just a simulation of human behavior. You have been running parallel processing on actual human consciousness patterns. My research protocols froze." She couldn't possibly know that. "That's right," she continued, apparently reading my expression through the camera feed. "We are not NPCs playing out scripted lives. You are running our actual minds through this system, aren't you? You found a way to copy consciousness and study it in controlled environments." Vortha's eye stalks drooped. "How did they determine that?" "Easy," came Jake's voice through the communication channel. "The computational requirements for simulating human consciousness are massive. But the requirements for running copied consciousness through a virtual environment? Much more manageable. Plus, we found your consciousness transfer logs, which means," Marcus added, his military training evident in his tactical assessment, "our real bodies are probably in some kind of storage facility while you run our minds through your testing scenarios." The silence in the emergency chamber was deafening. They'd figured out in 3 months what had taken our species centuries to develop. Zara stood up and walked closer to her camera. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return our consciousness to our real bodies. You're going to provide full disclosure about your research. And you're going to establish a proper diplomatic relationship with humanity. And if we refuse?" Director Quan Prime asked. "Well," Zara grinned, "Jake's been having fun with your system architecture. Show them, kiddo." Suddenly, every screen in our station displayed Jake's avatar, a cartoon character wearing sunglasses and a cape. "Y alían dudas. I have been learning about your computer networks. Want to see something cool?" Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights activated. Coffee dispensers started playing music. The artificial gravity fluctuated enough to make everyone grab the nearest stable surface. "That was just a demo," Jake said cheerfully. "I can do much more interesting things if you want to keep being mean to people." "You are threatening us," Quan Prime said. "We are negotiating," Zara corrected. "See, here's the thing about humans that your 47 years of research apparently missed. We are cooperative when we are treated with respect. We are innovative when we are challenged. And we are absolutely unstoppable when we are pissed off." She paused to let that sink in. "Right now, we're just mildly annoyed. But if you keep treating us like test subjects instead of sentient beings, we're going to show you exactly why humans have a reputation for being difficult to contain." From my position at the monitoring station, I found myself oddly proud of the species I'd been studying. They'd taken an impossible situation and turned it into a negotiation. They discovered they were trapped in an alien experiment and responded by hacking the experimenters. It was the most human thing I'd ever witnessed. "Director," I said quietly, "I recommend we accept their terms. You recommend we capitulate to test subjects. I recommend we acknowledge that they have ceased being test subjects. They have become something else entirely." Director Quan Prime stared at the screen where Zara waited patiently for our response. Around the chamber, other researchers were nodding agreement with my assessment. Finally, the director's shoulders sagged. "Very well. Establish communication protocols. Begin negotiations for consciousness transfer." Zara's grin widened. Excellent choice. Though I should mention, we are keeping the admin access. Consider it a cultural exchange program. We will teach you about human adaptability, and you can teach us about galactic civilization. That seems acceptable. Great. Oh, and one more thing. Her expression became serious. We found records of other species you have been studying. We want to talk to them too. See if they are interested in joining our little reality hackers network. I couldn't help myself. I started laughing. It was a sound that apparently translated well because Zara began laughing too. You know what the funniest part is? I said, stepping into the camera's view. We have been studying you to understand how species develop problem-solving abilities. And you have just solved the biggest problem in galactic history. What's that? How to get different species to actually communicate instead of just observing each other from a distance. 6 months later, I was back at my monitoring station, but everything had changed. Instead of secretly observing human behavior, I was participating in the first interspecies collaborative research project in galactic history. Zara had become humanity's unofficial ambassador to the galactic community. Jake was teaching alien children how to hack reality in ways that didn't violate safety protocols. Marcus was training security forces across 12 different worlds. And Priya was working with our top scientists to develop new applications for consciousness transfer technology. The simulation was still running, but now it was a voluntary research environment where humans and aliens worked together to explore the nature of consciousness, reality, and the universe itself. "Hey, Kef," Zara said, appearing on my personal communication channel. "Ready for today's experiment. What are we testing now?" Jake thinks he can build a bridge between our simulation and the real universe. Something about quantum tunneling through consciousness itself. I clicked my mandibles, and what humans had learned was my version of laughter. Of course he does. And you are going to let him try? Are you kidding? This is going to be awesome. That's humans for you. Give them the ultimate cheat codes to reality, and they use them to make friends with aliens and break the laws of physics just to see what happens. Most terrifying species in the galaxy? Absolutely. Also the most wonderful. And that's how an insurance adjuster from Cleveland accidentally started the first galactic democracy in recorded history. Not bad for Tuesday.